So here live with the CEO of FNB, Jacques Cilliers. Now, part of the issue here is that the loans were taken over by Saambou when Saambou failed in the early 2000s. The Lungelo, Lethu Human Rights Foundation is an organization which has taken banks to court over mortgages and other issues in the past. The president of that foundation is King Sibiya, and he's with me now. Mr. Sibiya, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. And also,
you've seen this play out, and I know that you've taken banks to court over other issues, particularly over the way that people have been charged. Okay. When you look at this claim, this allegation that FNB, after taking over Saambou loans, discriminated against black clients, what are you seeing? Do you believe those allegations?
Yeah, it's not only, thank you for this opportunity, but it's not only the FNB. Because you'll remember in 80s, there were United Building Society, you have NPS, you have PEM, and then so on. So this is a process. That's why today the ABSA is called Amalgamated Banking of South Africa, because they amalgamated all those banks. So what it means that they take over everything, including the eviction. It's where now the problem started, from Saambou, all that. Now this whole corruption or syndicate started there. Because what it happened, when these banks, PEM, Nedbank comes in, amalgamated banking comes in, some of the employees were supposed to be absorbed by these new banks, but they couldn't go there because there was a reason there were files, because you must remember, Soweto itself, the loan started in 1986, with two-room and garage. That's where Saambou comes in, and PEM, before the Nedbank comes in. So now those loans by then, it was 22,000. To 20,000. So,
sorry, I'm not understanding you.
Okay.
So what you're suggesting is that people had a loan of 20,000,
correct,
and then suddenly had to pay more.
Had to pay more.
Okay.
20 years contract. Because the gist of the matter now is that we are fighting the system.
So sorry, they had to pay more, or their bond was made longer?
Correct.
No. Which is it? They had to pay more.
They had to pay more.
Or their mortgage was extended by 2 years.
When extended to 20 years. Yes.
Okay.
Now from the 20 years. Now, some of these people, in 1994, when President Nelson Mandela announced that the black people for the first time they are going to get the title deed, the ownership. Now, some of the bank approached the government and said, no, there are people that are outstanding who never finished our bond. So you can't give them their title deed because the banks, they're still owing us. So now the question was, how many those people? And a survey was done. How many people that were owing the banks were 33,000 people, 33,000 national.
Of just those banks that formed ABSA?
Those banks from, yes. Now, the second question was that, okay, after those people are 33,000, what are the cost implications if the government pays on their behalf? So it was 1.277 billion rands, which is now the government couldn't run that project. The government outsources and then came up with the structure called SAFCON. No, it means if then you defaulted the bank must take your file to SAFCON. Now the SAFCON must establish the field worker, which will come at home and assess, maybe sometimes you will give it 6 months to rent the house, until your situation comes okay. So if then you cannot be okay, then they allocate to an RTP house.
Okay. The history is important, but let's just get to the present.
Yes.
So the issue really for you is, even with the FNB Saambou case is one thing. Yeah. The issue for you is you believe there are there's other evidence of corruption in this industry.
Correct.
Okay. So if there is that evidence, what then do you want to happen from here?
That's why now, you see, for instance, before I come today, there are property that are sold for 10 rands. Which is, I've done the research.
Let's just explain these properties, because these are properties that are sold by auction.
Yes.
So I take out a mortgage, I can't pay back, and then the bank auctions it for far less than the value, which is the case that you won.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Now, the question is, currently, that's why now there are two sides. With the new rules now, there must be a reserve price, which is, I'm happy about that, because that is struck the balance now. You see, whether my house is going to be sold on auction, whether it's sold on auction, but I have a right also to sell it on my own. That's a privilege now. The second thing, the court, it's no longer a prerogative of the bank. It's a prerogative of the bank now, with the court. For instance, if I have areas of 63,000 and then my balance is 200,000. So the bank used to say you must pay the entire balance because there's no relationship now. The relationship has been cancelled. So with the new rules now, the court is forcing the bank to pay the areas and then go back to my installment, which is, I think, it's a privilege then. Now, the reserve price is the last option. There are processes not to be done before the reserve price, which is, I think, is good, yes.
Okay. In all countries, you find that people have problems with their banks.
Correct.
People often hate banks, in fact. And they hate banks because they have to borrow money from them. And as a result, they have to pay back interest. And so your house that should cost $1 million costs you $2 million, or whatever the price might be. Do you have any solutions to get around a problem that all countries have? Is there anything, and in this country, because of the power imbalance, because you have banks who know all about money sitting in Sandton, and you have someone in Umlazi who doesn't know as much about how banks and money works. It's easy to take advantage of them.
Correct.
Right? So how do we protect them?
Okay. Now, the first thing that what we need to do, we need to transform the judiciary because the court are taking decisions. Secondly, transform the financial sector. Amongst the other things, what we need to transform is this 20 years contract. Because what informs 20 years contract? What method, what techniques that were used, for 20 years?
If it's not 20 years, it would be 10, and then no one could afford the payments.
So
if it's so the reason that people extend it over, so the reason that most people take a 20-year bond is so that they can afford the monthly payments.
No,
right?
You see, my argument it will be on that score. If I can afford to pay a 1 million rands car within 5 years, why I cannot pay my bond for 5 years? Because at the same time, you look at the house, it's a necessity. The house is luxury. I can live without a car, but without a house. So, in other words, it means that's one point. The second point is that when I buy a car, West Bank, and so on, there's a compulsory insurance in the car. No, why there's not a compulsory insurance?
In most bonds, doesn't the bank take out insurance?
The only insurance what they have is not to secure you, is to pay when the house is burnt.
Yes, so the bank gets the money back.
Correct.
All right, I'm with you. Yes. Okay.
You see, so and this insurance issue, I must be honest with you, the client or the consumer must be the one who decides who is the best insurance. For instance, in terms of the law, the client must be the one who chooses the insurance. Now, this insurance is decided by the bank because it's only serving the interest of the bank. What if then my house is not being burned or there is no maintenance? What's going to happen? It means that money for insurance I paid, it's gone. So I cannot be refunded that. But if I was saying this insurance is for when I'm retrenched, when I passed on, so my wife can't. Because you see, there's a very difficult situation in our culture. You see, I lost my husband. It's a tragedy. After losing my husband, I lost the house too. It's a double tragedy. Now you remember, this takes us back to apartheid system. You see, so now with these new rules, I'm quite happy because whether I lose my house, but at least I'm going to get something to start a new life somewhere. But the next point is now, these new rules are only caters for the current cases, on auction and that. But what about those from 1994 until now? Now, that's why now I'm proposing to go to court with the 60 billion rands because my target are those who have been already, their houses been repossessed.
It's quite difficult to get a retrospective judgment. Judges almost always rule only on cases in the future. They don't rule on the past.
Yeah, but it depends the circumstances, how to present your case in court.
Sure.
That's very important because you see my issue now, what is very serious, if I have more funding, I'll be sticking on consumer education.
I'm sure, Mr. Sibiya, that everyone who has a problem with their bank would probably give you some money. Thank you very much indeed. King Sibiya is the president of the Lungelo Lethu Human Rights Foundation.